Hello, this is Jeff Thomlinson. Welcome to Finding Joe, the Hero's Journey podcast. You're going to hear some stories, some adventures, some challenges, some insights from people probably not unlike yourself that have been moving through life. There was a fork in the road, there was a change. They had to go up against something, a challenge, a transformation, a life change, perhaps. And then they come back. They return. They bring back the gifts of that journey, that hero's journey, based on the work of Joseph Campbell. I think you'll hear the timeless truths that are represented here, but represented in a way that we can all relate to. Also, we will have some takeaways at the end, some completion, also a recording, a guided meditation that can help to integrate the wisdom and content from the Hero's Journey podcast. This podcast began from the inspiration of doing yoga teacher trainings for many years and hearing people's stories, the reasons that some of them started on a spiritual quest to move beyond the challenges they were facing in their day-to-day. It was very inspiring. I suggest you watch the film Finding Joe, an excellent example of these timeless truths represented in a way that we can all relate to. And finally, I'll add that working in schools for the past 10 years, I've got to see what is happening, that there's a change, a disruption, a moving away from a groundedness and really the foundations of relationship and community that are universal. So I hope you can appreciate this podcast that will help maybe bring some of that relatedness, that connection through the stories and the experiences that we all share. Welcome to the Hero's Journey podcast, Finding Joe, the inspiration of Joseph Campbell. And I'm with Juliana Lavell today, and we've known each other a long time in our field of yoga and yoga teaching and friends and listeners for each other and, peers. And it's been a lovely connection always. It's organically shown up at different times. And I think this is another one of them now where I knew I was creating some contacts for this podcast, and that just came to me. And so I reached out and thankfully Juliana was gracious enough to join us. So, and we'll get into that in a minute. We'll get into the exploration of the hero's journey. But I'd love for you, Juliana, to take a few moments and say a little bit about yourself, whatever you'd like to share with those that are listening.
All right, thank you. It's an honor to be interviewed or to share my story with you. It just feels like a really perfect place to, have the first time to share this story. I am a yoga teacher. I am an artist. I'm a creative in many avenues. I have a 14-year-old daughter and a golden retriever. And I am a free spirit, and I'm definitely a spiritual seeker in many forms.
Yeah, that is very clear. That always comes through. I think even now on a Zoom, podcast audio, that radiance that we share. I just think when I do see you in person, or it's just our kind of eyes light up, and that's always a good affirmation of those of us that are those seekers, right? So I really respect that. Yeah.
And I just want to say too that Harshad and Uchita have been like very special teachers to me in my life through many heroes' journeys. And I've always come back to that feeling that I've had in your studios and your spaces that you've held. So I just want to thank you for that.
very much. I'm taking that in. Thank you. Okay, well, I think we can dive in. So I'd love for you to, I'll probably interject in a tactful way at different points, or make sure we're on our journey here. But this hero's journey that has kind of the beginning, it's called the separation, where kind of life is going along, and then there's kind of a fork in the road, and then go up against the initiation, the challenge, the whatever that is that's unique to each of us, but shared by all of us. And then the return is the ending, where you kind of come back into the world and life unfolding with whatever those gifts are. So it makes sense that we start at the beginning. So maybe say a little bit about kind of your moving along in life, and how that was going, and what unfolded.
So this was my diagnosis is ulcerative colitis, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. But I was carrying on with life, and I was living in Calgary, Alberta for a few years, and I kind of thought that I had a handle on life in a lot of ways. I was teaching yoga, and I was, collecting spring water and eating organic and trying to do all the right things in the wellness realm. However, I was a single parent, and I was a single parent at that time for, I guess, 8 years. And so I was kind of doing it on my own in Calgary, without a lot of community support or like family help there. And I just started noticing symptoms in my digestive system. I don't know how graphic we want to get here, but I basically started bleeding out of the bottom. And I wasn't sure what was happening. I went to the doctor, and I was misdiagnosed. So I carried on kind of just unsure of what was happening for about 3 years, where I kind of like wavered in and out of symptoms, and until it got really bad in 2019, to the point where I just I was losing a lot of blood, and I was kind of keeping it to myself, I guess. I was confused what was going on. And it's sort of a shameful experience to like not have control over your bowels. And so that's what I was experiencing a lot, where I got to the point where I was just very depleted, very anemic, and I was no longer able to teach a yoga class or carry on with my work because I was so sick, and I literally couldn't contain my bowels properly anymore. So I finally was, found a doctor that would take my symptoms seriously, and she ordered me to get a colonoscopy. And my mother, who's a nurse and a counselor, and she ordered me to move back to Kelowna. So I kind of dropped everything and returned home to Kelowna, and where I was properly diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And at that time, I was able to go on prednisone, and that kind of put me into remission for about 8 months. So I carried on with my work, and just thought, okay, well, that was a bump in the road, and I'm gonna thank God that's over. And then 8 months later, it came back again, and I tried the steroids again, and this time the steroids weren't effective. And I ended up in the hospital for about a month. and I lost a ton of weight. I think Harshad and Uchida came to see me actually after I got home from the hospital. I was quite thin and emaciated. I've never been quite so sickly looking in my life. And so that was certainly very challenging. That was my first like near death experience where I was trying really hard to not to use the biologic drugs. I was, seeing a naturopath and doing acupuncture. And, I'm a person that never took a Tylenol or an antibiotic ever. Like I just was trying everything alternative. However, I was fighting for my life. And so it was either surgery or I take these immune suppression drugs, which are basically similar to cancer therapy drugs. And so it did work for a few months. However, I had an allergic reaction to the immune suppression drugs. I believe it was a Remicade that I was on for a little while. And then it returned again, where with a vengeance again. I was kind of back gaining weight and feeling better and thinking, oh, I'm gonna beat this. And then it just like hit me again in November of 2020. And so I ended up back in the hospital again. And this time again, it was like, it ended up being like another month in the hospital. And, after like 1 week in a hospital bed, you start going a little crazy. And so after you're there, and this is during the time of COVID too, where there's like a lot of isolation and restrictions. So I guess we're getting into the separation, I suppose, of the journey.
Well, yeah, no, you're right there in that, you're at the peak of the challenge. I would say the initiation, the dragon, as Joseph Campbell would say, where it was kind of the depth of the struggle. It sounds like, is that right?
Yeah, I think the dragon certainly showed up like the summer, but like when I went into the hospital and that first severe kind of bout of colitis. That's when I was faced with my own death. I had a visit from the Grim Reaper actually that summer in the hospital, and it was kind of, I think, this choice of what am I was it was very there was a lot of feelings that came around, like confusion and anger and sadness over why this was happening, and finding a way to, I want to keep fighting for my life. I want to keep the fight, but I also am like, I felt like I had no control over it.
Yeah.
And that sort of like helplessness of my body like deteriorating, while my mind was very much like, no, but I enjoy my life. Like, what's happening?
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, it was just definitely this internal battle going on through all of that, and lots of mixed emotions. And then, November 2020, I ended up having emergency surgery to remove my entire large intestine and rectum. And I definitely don't want to say that surgery is a cure for this disease. It's not. However, in some cases, like mine, and I even have a hard time kind of accepting it to this day. I still kind of, it's a tough pill to swallow that I had to have that surgery. Or I can find myself going back and thinking, oh, if I only had some other intervention, but that's a futile response. And So yeah, I had an ostomy bag for 6 months. That's the external appliance. And then thankfully I had the option to have what's called a J pouch, where they put your plumbing back inside you, and they take the small intestine and sew it up to create like a makeshift colon.
Yeah.
Um, and so that whole journey was like extraordinary, in the sense that my body, I had to like poop out of a bag on my belly for 6 months. Um, it was, when I look back on it, I actually feel grateful that
Yeah.
I got to experience that. Um, I couldn't say that at the time. I went through, that self-loathing, and I thought that I was like the hunchback of Notre Dame, like lock me up in the tower. I was in complete disgust with myself. Um, in many ways, it was all just so much. And but now I see where I really had to kind of pick myself up by my own bootstraps. And um I have a daughter who is, a teenage daughter who I know they struggle with self-image and things like that.
Sure.
And it was really important to me, to be an example for her of what it looks like to love myself unconditionally. It was, having her as a witness was really powerful for me to like snap out of my misery.
Yeah.
And I did, and I ended up, I'm very grateful for like the self-care practices that I have and the family and support that I have. I, got myself into counseling, and I just started with rituals. Like I would do mirror work, or I would like make a ritual of lighting a candle when I would get dressed, and and pay attention to my thoughts that I would have when I would see myself in the mirror with an ostomy. And I would choose to be like, I'm alive and I'm beautiful, and and so I just want to say, for those people that have that have to have a permanent ostomy, that there is so much good quality of life to be had with the ostomy. I ended up wearing bathing suits, going swimming, doing all of the things, even going on dates. Nothing held me back with having
Wow.
that bag.
Well, that's the return. That's the gift, right? You're paying it forward now in terms of, yeah, it's such a beautiful, I'm not interrupting. I just want to say that is the hero's journey. That's a powerful story. And I love this part where it's, the gift that pays forward now in terms of, you just said it, like your daughter and your family, and then the integrity of being around the swimming people or around the people on a date or whomever, the authenticity that comes from, from the mirror gaze with a candle of like, this is me, this is today, this is can I love myself as I am right now? Yes, is what I'm hearing. And I think, wow, what a powerful message. And I love that you're speaking to those people with a colostomy bag, that's not who you are, is what I'm not saying it for you, but that's what I'm hearing. It's like, you know, um, look further than that. So I think that's an extremely powerful message. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly was. I feel very grateful now that I don't have to have the bag anymore, and there is that technology with surgery to have the J pouch, which is the internal pouch. But yes, I look at people now with disabilities. It was interesting because when I had the ostomy bag, I would see people with prosthetic limbs. It was like a weird synchronicity where I would
Mm.
just be out and about. I swear I don't see them anymore very often, but when I had that bag, I would notice people with a prosthetic leg or things like that, like fairly commonly, and I would notice that running shoe on the prosthetic leg. And I would notice like that person is getting out there and living life, or
Yeah.
that person in the wheelchair that's like skiing down the mountain in a cool skiing device
Right.
or something. And I just and that's sort of where the part of my return is in the storytelling.
Yeah.
And there are many tools that are important to me in the return process. But storytelling, I feel like, is like vital. And one of the first things that I did when I was laying in my hospital bed is I went on Instagram and YouTube and I found people that have ostomy bags.
Mm.
I found them sharing their stories.
Yeah.
And some of the stories are challenging to look at. And then a lot of stories are like, wow, this person won a international bodybuilding contest with her bag. Or this person like is out there on their sup board, or this person's having babies with a J pouch after they had
Right.
all of this happen.
Right.
So it's in that storytelling, I feel like that's where I guess I feel passionate um that we're able to share our heroes' journeys so that we
Yeah.
can recognize not only our suffering, but our triumph in one another, and know that we're not alone in that process.
Yeah. I just want to echo back how universal that story is, and how I love that that includes all of us, right? I mean, it's you're talking about a powerful situation that you went through, which I think is fascinating in itself. As you go back to the very beginning of your hero's journey, and it's like, I know you, I know you live a healthy life and you make, choices really powerfully, that, intentionally, etc. And I like that you said, when you were in Calgary, you're growing your own food, and like we're saying, mountain water or something, fresh water, and the different choices, and even the no aspirin and no drugs, no medications. I understand that too, and yet this is what occurred, right? Like, what a message that is. It's like, I'm going to say this. I don't want to speak for anybody when I do these podcasts, but it's like, what I want to hear, what I want to say in that is like, you're doing everything right. Like, you're living, you're going along, and yet life unfolds. Here's what happened. And what do we do with that at the end? Do we, and I think it was beautiful when you said, kind of the challenge part of the Grim Reaper coming, and you're really battling with, I heard that, and I think that's we all need to hear that. Like, we could be there, or maybe we have been there, or maybe somebody that's going to hear this, is there right now. And
I think there's so much like beauty in death and in coming to the precipice of our mortality. And what that edge has to offer is like coming back to now, and like, holy shit, like it definitely feels like I'm sort of stepping in and out of a dream state, being back in my life now. There's this quality that is like everything is sort of surreal
Yeah.
here. And what it means to be alive, because I feel like it's in this sort of duality dance that we do on this human school plane, or whatever you want to call it. It's easy to get sucked into other people's ideas of what we should be doing or believing or choosing moment to moment. And I think that it's that self-betrayal is kind of, it's a slow death. And this process has made me reevaluate what it means to be alive, and what things make me feel alive, and like why do I want to be alive? um and it's definitely taken me on a whole journey of well, one thing that I really want to touch on is this, something that I notice within myself. Like my witness consciousness, I feel, is a lot more dominant or louder now. And the fact that that we're not in control of everything, like, just to kind of play off what you were just saying of, I was going along eating the right things and breathing all the right breath practices and
Right.
chanting or doing my affirmations. However, we're not in control of everything all the time. And I think that this idea, there's a lot of ideology out there that, like, we can manifest our reality all the time, or I created all of this. And so I went into this sort of like self, like, shaming kind of thing of like, what did I do to like draw this to myself? Or but I really feel like I just really love this indigenous description that there's like the great mystery. And part of like mystery is that we're not in control of it, and that we're not supposed to control all of it. And it's like this neurosis to always be like, oh, if I can just do all the right things, then my life will just be perfect. And it's just not, I don't know that any of us are like, can escape the hero's journey.
Exactly.
I mean, let me know if you do. But like,
no, I don't. And I was just going to say, what I'm hearing you say there too is like, the people that try to stay in control and do it all right, they're denying themselves a hero's journey. There's going to be an opportunity in that fork in the road. How could that not be true? If that isn't true, then I don't know why I'm doing this. Like, why are we spiritual being? Is it just like a cosmic joke that we're here? I don't believe that. I love science and I dig it. And yet in quantum physics, let's go there. And there's something going on here that's very special. And I think why wouldn't someone want to at least understand this journey? And I can say I deny it sometimes. Sometimes I try to keep, I don't go in the fork in the road. I'm just going to stay on the safe thing that I know over here. But I think the more I've practiced, and the more you said self-awareness, internal witness, is able to not react and stay, like you said, louder. It's a little bit louder. The witness is louder. Hey, Jeff, don't do that. To stay with it and then receive the gift of whatever that is. And I think, thank you for being here and doing this, because that's part of my intention, is that, people hear the story and they get to practice, they start to practice that. And I think it's the practice. It's like neuroscience. It's like, you repeat something, you get better at it, so you repeat the hero's journey. You're kind of like, oh, I survived that. And I have some wisdom, I grew, I transformed. And I even wrote in the notes, it's not always clean, it can be messy. The journey can come out messy too, but it's usually in retrospect, that's the funny thing,
it's later sometimes when you kind of go, oh yeah, there was the gift, there was the return. It didn't seem like it. So, but I heard that in your story. I was really powerful to hear. I thought you told it beautifully, and yeah, it was it's engaging. I was feeling it for sure. So
Yeah, I feel certainly this like dance of like in your words you talk about like equanimity, and um I feel like it's, it is just finding that dance of like holding on and letting go and holding on and
mhm,
letting go. And it's, yeah, it's I love the quote by Ram Dass where he says, we're all just walking each other home. And that's where, I really feel like there's that intersection of like Holy Spirit with community is, I wouldn't be here without like all of the earth angels and community that believed in me when I like found it really hard to believe in myself. And I think as like spiritual teachers or leaders, um, you know, I don't see myself in that. I don't like to put myself on that sort of pedestal. Um, but I think that the beauty in that is I got to really let go and like see God in everybody, and like let people help me too was a
yes,
huge thing.
yes,
Like letting my students that were, showing up to support me and love me and remind me of who I am was just like so beautiful that it was just like this whole circle of holding hands, and here we are together. And I
yeah,
had like the Mormon church and the Catholic church and all of my hippie friends all all praying and intending in their own unique ways, and it was just beautiful.
that is
So
beautiful. That is beautiful. I mean, I was in that mix, right? So I hear you, right? What a just that right there. What a message that is. It's like, it, when the going gets tough, communities come together. I saw that in Florida when we went through a hurricane. You know, I just think we need to hear these stories to say, well, we're kind of all in this together right now, and it's important. Not that every time in history isn't important, but I think it's important time to share these stories and to understand our relatedness, and to, you so beautifully said, and to be open to the support of the earth angels, as you said, because I think that's exactly right. Spiritual beings masquerading as a human dude or dudette.
yeah.
I yeah,
Something one of my dear mentors said to me that is so simple, um, during some of my darkest moments or like moments of suffering, even physical suffering, is she just said, no matter what happens, it's okay. You're okay.
yeah,
Like, even in suffering, even in death, even in whatever disastrous, horrible thing that could happen to any of us, we're all it's okay.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yep, yep. That's beautiful wisdom, and sometimes hard for people to hear.
Another thing I had to really let go of was like victim consciousness. I had to get sick of my own self and be like, because I think that it is a neurosis to get stuck in, for me, kind of um an attitude that like there's something um afflicting itself onto me, and like just feeling sorry for myself.
Right.
And I just reached a point where, I think that I just see that a lot even in like the sort of like psychotherapy or like wellness community, where we go back and look at our relationship with our parents or things that happened in our lives. We sort of put ourselves in this victim identity. And I just see how it's just not useful. It's not good to stay there for too long.
I agree 100%. And I think that's a fork in the road. That's a separation right there. I'll take the energy of that, of like, oh, my dad, what a bonehead, and that screwed up. And let me use that energy to then go into the challenge of that, of like, oh, I can't, whatever that would be. I don't want to tell someone's story, but exactly right. But many people kind of get stuck on that victim trajectory, which is kind of it's funny, it's kind of a form of control. Like, I'm just going to stay that victim and that story. So thank you so much for saying that, because that's extremely powerful. I mean, there's a lot in this whole story, those months, the soul searching in the hospital, and this is a rich hero's journey that you explained. There's so many beautiful gems in there.
I do offer like mentorship and tarot readings if somebody was wanting a reading in that way.
Yep.
But certainly if there is anyone that's going through like an ulcerative colitis journey with, going through that challenge, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about that.
Yeah.
And I just certainly like forgiveness and prayer
Yes.
is a big deal for me even now. I love it.
Me too.
Yeah, it's a practice. And that's the thing, it's just
It's a practice.
yeah.
Right. Well, I bow deeply in reverence to your hero's journey, and I see that smile. I know that glow. I feel the love coming back and forth between us. I trust that we're paying it forward. We're paying it forward. We've got some wisdom. We've got a couple years under our belt, and we've done some journeys now, and so that's part of our sharing moving forward for those that are coming up behind us, our daughters, yours and mine. And so thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate this.
Thank you for listening to Finding Joe, the Hero's Journey podcast. I hope that you feel inspired, informed, entertained. Sure, I hope all of the above. We suggest that you take advantage of the guided meditation recording, which is linked below. As well, you're welcome to look at the yoga training courses that we offer, or visit the Take a Breath information on our website, or even to reach out to us, talk to us, become a guest on the podcast, or suggest a guest to us. Thank you so much for being part of this community.